So without further ado, thank you guys for coming, and let's have a good conversation. So to start things off, do you guys want to just give a very brief overview of what you do on the day-to-day, where you're coming from, where your background is, and then maybe how you got started with GCDesign?
All right, well, thanks Dave, thanks for having us. This is amazing to see so many people here to hear from us. And I'll start by saying that my name is Enright, and I'm in my day job, not in GCDesign. I work for the federal government of Canada as a research analyst. Specifically, what I do is I follow stakeholders in the public environment and write analyses that influence policy and communications approaches based on what these stakeholders are saying about public policy issues. My background is as a sociologist, and I have a master's in sociology, specifically related to behavior change theory of international development programs. And I'll say more about GCDesign in a few minutes, and I'll let you talk about it.
Okay, I'm Wesley. In my day job, I work at Treasury Board Secretariat, which is the OMB equivalent. We also the
Management and budget.
Management and budget. So I'm a policy analyst. I lead the policy area for web usability. So I mostly answer questions from government departments about how to apply user-centered design to online websites and online services that the government offers to the public. So I've been in the government for 12 years, and I started out in performance measurement. So I kind of came to usability and user-centered design through that route, where I was looking for validation methods and test methods for how to measure whether or not a government website was a success. And I used analytics and testing, and I came to usability testing and user-centered design. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to influence a policy shift, an internal policy shift, and I was able to make user-centered design mandatory for all 100 government departments who were publishing. We have about 1,500 websites, over 10 million pages, and another 300 transactional services.
That's amazing. So what is GCDesign? Let's just ask the big question.
Okay, GCDesign is a hashtag, it's a network, it's a community of design thinkers, it's an idea in its infancy. It's a pitch to senior management to give us time to train and build capacity in government to use design thinking for wicked problems, and even less wicked problems like service design and process design and policy design. So we've been experimenting with different design methods and approaches, and like I said, we came at this from a user-centered design process, and we have seen success in that area. We were given an opportunity to go to senior management with ideas for how to make the public sector or public service more effective, and we pitched the idea in front of 150 of our peers, mostly policy wonks, policy analysts, webbies, friends and colleagues, and we won by popular vote. So we got to go in front of the most senior executives in government, a board called Deputy Minister Committee on Policy Innovation, and they endorsed our idea for GCDesign. And then began the long road of defining what that actually meant.
So how did you guys get the group together? Because if I recall, Brian, you weren't part of the UX and usability team.
I was not.
It's true. We're a multidisciplinary team, so we found Brian based on the work that he'd done on his master's degree. Some of us had worked together before. Sage and I had worked together on something called the User Experience Working Group. That was a working group that we started after the policy, the standard on web usability came out, to help build capacity just to apply user-centered design in the web space. So we had about 60 usability and user experience researchers, testers, designers, developers working together in an informal capacity. So we actually just came together and convened around the idea.
So Brian, you don't come from a design background.
Not at all. I'm not a designer.
So what do you think of design, or how would you explain design to someone like yourself who doesn't have a background in design?
I see it as a method. I see it as a method that could drastically thought to myself, wow, this is crazy. What they're doing is great, but I don't think anyone has an appetite for it right now. And I said, sure, sign me up. Let me help you push together and get this on the agenda of senior management so that we can find new ways to deliver better programs and services to Canadians. Because through my schoolwork, I had studied a few government federal programs and policies, and using ethnography and a few other qualitative methods, not quite through the design process, but elements of it. I mean, I could see huge gaps that we could, using these methods, improve our policies and deliver better results for Canadians. And I believe that their expectations are changing. As a citizen myself, doing my taxes, everything that I do, I'm thinking, why can't this be done so much easier and better? It's happening in the private sector. So what's going on here? And I see design thinking as a way to do that.
So why do you think no one has done this before? Obviously, the government has been around a very long time, but this hasn't happened yet. So why now? Or why hasn't it happened in the past?
There just seem to be a zeitgeist around the world of design labs and innovation labs and social innovation labs coming around the world. And in the Canadian context, there had been some groundwork made by previous people who had also studied the research and seen the trends happening in other places, like in the UK Design Council and in MindLab and other places, the nudge unit in the UK government. Australia also had a Design Gov or a lab type setting. So I don't know, I think we've just been pushed to the point where we can't continue with business as usual. And the status quo isn't working anymore. And I think there is a real sense of frustration with the current process, internally and externally. So, when you see really low voter turnout and a massive disengagement from the political stream around the world, I don't think that's unique to Canada. You just have to start looking for anything, like what's going to work here. And I don't think design is the only answer, but I do think it's part of the potential solution.
How would you describe what it's like to work inside Canada's government? We have a few folks here from New York City's government, but I'd say most of the audience probably doesn't work in government. What's it like?
I'll take a crack at that. Siloed? It's siloed, but it's, I don't really know what to say. It's siloed, but it's
so I've been 12 years in government, and I worked in the private sector and I worked in the nonprofit sector before joining government. And I didn't expect to go into government at all. Like, I studied psychology, and it wasn't until I was already in government that I took a diploma in business analysis. I love it because it's big, and you have the opportunity to do many, many, many things, and you can really see a system at work. And the longer I'm in government on the inside, I see the way things, when you push on a lever over here, it like comes out over there. And I think that's a good metaphor for many things. And the opportunity of working in government is to be on the inside of that balloon that citizens and people working in other sectors are pushing on as a lever, and I get to react. So I found it, as a career, I found it very challenging in good ways and in bad ways. It's been educational to discover that government has mechanisms that it can use, and I've learned recently. I took a course from two seasoned public servants who had been in government for 30 years, and they talked about the mechanisms, like traditional mechanisms that government has. We can regulate, we can taxate, we can fund, is that a word? We can tax, so we can tax, we can fund, we can legislate, and we can communicate. So we are a platform, and Tim O'Reilly talked a lot about government as a platform. And some of the work that I've been doing in the last few years is with open source and integrating open source culture and leading the design practice within an open source framework. And many of these these tools are finding their way into government, partly because other, citizens are demanding a change and citizens are demanding a more open and transparent democratic process. So it just feels, it's an honor for me to be able to accept these ideas and try to do whatever I can to change that environment, which is, what did you say earlier? It's been around so long.
Oh, it's a massive system, and systems don't change easily. I mean, the fact that it survived as an institution shows that it's resistant to change.
And there was, Megan had sent me the Endometer Trust Barometer. Edelman, what is it called?
Trust Barometer.
The work on the Edelman Trust Barometer. Have you heard of this before? So basically they've done this global survey, and the trust in government, the percentage of people who have trust in government is around 50%. That's atrocious. People have a higher trust in media and business than they do in government. And that is global. That is not a Canadian statistic. Canadian statistics are about the same. We're on par with the international trend. That's really discouraging. That's really disappointing, and that's really discouraging because we are setting a policy framework that impacts people's lives every single day. And yet, people are disengaged from it. They're not interested in it. They don't think it has anything to do with them, especially at the federal level where we're regulating the transportation industry. That sounds really boring until a plane or a train goes off the tracks in a small town carrying a load of gasoline and explodes, and a town is devastated. And then everybody's like, well, government regulations should have been there, and now everybody's interested, but you don't want to read a 200-page PDF written in legalese about what that regulation on the rail industry actually looks like. So we have this impetus for change, we have a mandate for change, and we have a mandate to serve a population. And it's time to take that opportunity in a new direction.
So Brian, you described design as a method or a process. Do you think that design can, or the method of design can help rebuild some of that trust? Can help reshape how government interacts with the people?
I think incrementally, of course.
How?
Getting things right and improving things. Either saving money or making things better for citizens. I think that's the ultimate goal of improving policies. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm interested. And I want to say that the government gets a lot right. We really do get a lot right. And so we're not saying things are actually broken. We're just saying, hey, there's opportunities for improvement, and where we're going to get those is from new methods, and that's where design comes in. And I think the more we see that, the more government gets on par with some other standards. The day that I can maybe vote online, well, maybe not entirely that, but the way that I can access my government information, like I can access my bank information, would be fantastic. I think it's going to take, given the silos that I saw in the government, it's going to take design thinking to bring all those people together and to work through how do we do this, how do we get this right, and I think that's where design thinking really will help.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what types of services your department provides to the public, and how you could use something like ethnography or its stakeholder engagement and co-creation in the redesign of your government services?
My department I work at is called Employment and Social Development. We have, under our portfolio, we have Passport Canada, we have Service Canada, which delivers your cradle-to-grave services from the day you're born, you need a social insurance number, and to the day you die when you file the death certificate. We do everything. In between, we help you fund your education, we help you find new work and retrain you, and we give you employment insurance money when you're out of a job. We also look after the pension system in Canada and how you receive pensions, partly the Canada Pension Plan, as well as our old age security network, which starts paying you at a certain age as well, on top of everything else. We have policy area that feeds into a program area that feeds into a service delivery area. And they don't really talk to each other that much, but they can. And one simple way of improving things would just be to do some ethnography with clients. Let's look at, you've lost your job. How can we improve this process for you so that we can serve you faster and so that you can get back to work faster? And that's something that, we're doing it, we're working on it, but design thinking could really come in and prototype some better ways of doing it. And one way to do that would be to talk with the frontline workers, the people that you call when you say, I've lost my job. How do I fill out the forms? Or the people you go see when you've lost your job and you actually go to pick up your check. So taking the experience of these frontline workers and applying it to the policy and program area would be great. And design thinking allows that. It would give us the method to say, well, what problem are we actually solving? Is it actually the problem or is it a symptom of the problem? And we need to actually reframe what the problem is.
So that's great. So that sounds like your thesis of what you're trying to accomplish. So now can you talk about how the framework of GCDesign is going to support that? Or what programs that make up GCDesign will allow you to accomplish all the great things?
Programs will make up GCDesign.
That's a really interesting question. You mentioned the Gov3 class that we're taking with Ethnovac at NYU, and we had the pleasure of participating online since January, and our whole team has sort of been working through this question of what it actually is. Is it a lab like this? Is it a physical space? Is it a mindset? Is it a mental space? Is it a safe space? Is it time in our calendar to spend doing ethnography? Or coming together and engaging people who have just lost their jobs to figure out, okay, this is how the service is offered now, how do we need to improve it so that's more responsive to their needs? We're not quite sure yet. There is definitely an ecosystem or the potential for the lab model to emerge. Mostly we just want time during the day to spend on this. I have 3 other large areas of responsibility right now, and this is not on my work plan. So really what we're trying to do is get management to not just endorse the idea and agree with the idea, because it's like saying, like when I first came to usability and user-centered design, I had to go and pitch in front of the management committee similar to what we did in the fall. And somebody told me like 2 years later, yeah, no one can say no to that because they would look like a jerk. So the idea of not being more user-friendly, yeah, no one's going to say that's a bad idea. So you kind of put us in a tough spot there. We had to accept what you were saying and let you do it. And I was lucky to find a fit for a job and make that my job. What we don't have right now is the framework within our organization to be a policy designer or even a service designer. Those jobs are starting to pop up. Even design and designer as applied to web is relatively new. We had some graphic designers, interaction designers, some, like we have that a little bit, but we mostly have developers and content writers. We have those streams, and so these new hybrid streams where we're looking for people who can think in abstract terms and think about design methods as you might apply that to a process or a policy or a service or something internal or a physical space, like these horrible cubicles that make us feel like we're a rat in a cage. Like, is there something that can be done about that, and how can we even just improve the way we sort of convene in our physical environment or within our city? We don't have that yet.
Both of you, right? You're doing this in your free time. It's something else that you do, on top of your day job, on top of, all the things you have to do to just live in a city. I mean, for us here with Civic Service, I don't do this as my full time. I work for actually the mayor's office by day, doing something completely different, unrelated to this. And finding the time to do this. I was talking to Ryan before we started here that, the last 4 days I just feel burned out right now between my job, between preparing for this event, between all the other things we have going on. It's hard to maintain this kind of, I guess we would call it the entrepreneurial lifestyle of trying to do something from within. What's it like? What's it like to be an entrepreneur inside Canada's government?
Exhausting.
Fun.
Fun and exhausting.
Fun and exhausting.
We've had some success, like with the user experience working group, with the open source toolkit, with GCDesign, we've had success. So the bottom up is possible. It is possible, but you have to understand how the top down works as well. And so the top down is there and the bottom up is here. When it's here, it can work. When it's here, it doesn't work. They don't care. You're not on the radar. But it is tiring. What's it like for you?
It's tiring, but it's worth it. Seeing these things change and just thinking things through and realizing that actually there are ways to get your message across, and it's about I think it's about the right timing. Really. I mean, GCDesign is something that people tried 3 years ago. They were a group that tried to they wanted to build a policy innovation lab 3 years ago, and there was no appetite for it. And we've come around saying the same things in a different way. We weren't leading the lab, we were leading with design thinking. And with just a number of things happening at the same time, the timing was right, and suddenly people started listening, and the appetite for what we've been saying has been growing. So I really enjoy it. I think we're pushing for something that's worth it, and we're getting there, and it's on more people's radar. And when we come back to Ottawa, people are going to be asking us, well, tell us more about design thinking. The appetite's there. Our colleagues want to know more about it, and we want to be in a position to support them and grow that network and to help others, because we can't keep pushing, and I don't think we should. I think what we should do is enable others to kind of give them what they need so that they can push as well, and then that's when we'll really start seeing the change that we're really seeking.